Hello, we working? Everyone hear me? Yay. Hello. So I believe in being honest and authentic right up front. Okay? I'm really nervous here tonight. I usually don't get nervous about these, but I'm actually nervous about this one. Because in the past, when I've done these, they have been based on historical fact, maybe a little known fact, or something that was kind of obscure history, or just kind of, filtering through all of the different LDS teachings and stuff like that. But this is going to be a little different, because what I'm really presenting to you is more in lines with a hypothesis more than anything. On this particular issue that I will be talking about, there are people, good Christian men and women, scholars on both sides of this argument, who have different views, who believe that the information I'm going to share with you tonight is legitimate. There are some who do not believe that it's true. And then there's a third group who say, yeah, there's enough here that this is possible. I am in the third camp. Otherwise, I would not be here. The information I want to share tonight, I believe, is in accord that idea of a preponderance of evidence, right? If it was just one or two things in and of themselves, you could call that a coincidence. But when you have fact after fact after fact after fact after fact, then a pattern begins to form. And that is kind of what I want to focus on tonight, is that pattern, okay? That preponderance of evidence, that you cannot just outright dismiss everything that I want to talk about. That there's debate, and there should be debate, okay? Anytime someone tells you that science is settled, danger, okay? Or the theology is settled. No, we need to have an open mind. We should hear things, and we should weigh it against the Bible. Everything should always come against the Bible, right? That's where we always must be rooted. So, in the past, I have talked about these things. I have talked about the statue of Joseph, most likely his tomb. We've talked about Avaris, where that's up in Gosha, which is probably one of the cities where they were. If you want to watch those previous videos I've made, you can do that on my YouTube channel that I have made specifically for this event, okay? It's very easy. It's just youtube.com/historical Christianity. If you go to that YouTube site, you can watch all of these past apologetics conferences that we've done, including this one, which will be up in probably another week or so, okay? One cool thing, though, I want to share before we kind of get into the meat of things, is just last year in the city in northern Sudan, thousands of years ago, northern Sudan was southern Egypt, okay? And there's an Egyptian temple there at Soleb. So they found this inscription called the Soleb inscription, right? Very original. And on this cartouche in Egyptian, it says in Egyptian, the nomads of Yahweh. So they found just last year the oldest mention of the name of God outside of the Bible from 1400 BC. Okay? And the context is all of this Egyptian king, Amenhotep II, is bragging about all the people he's beaten. All of his enemies to the east, all of his enemies to the west, his enemies to the south, and his enemies to the north. One of the enemies to the north he calls the nomads, or the cattle herders or sheep herders. The word can be used in different ways. But the point is, this is a nomadic people, and they're following Yahweh. Does that sound like something from Exodus? It most assuredly does. So this is kind of in the nerdy archaeology world. That inscription is causing a lot of ripples in that very nerdy field right now. So it's proof that the Israelites, along with all those other things up there, prove that the Israelites were in Egypt as slaves, certainly as nomads after they left, in 1400 BC. But having said that, what I do want to talk about is the Red Sea crossing and Mount Sinai. Because if those things are real, if that actually happens, if we find like the real Mount Sinai, like Pastor Curtis just said, everything else at that point is true. The rest of it is true. So this is very debating, controversy stuff. So I'm not going to hide that fact. So if you look in the back of your Bibles, you will see maps, most of you. And I joke that the Bible is inspired from Genesis to Revelation. When you get to the maps, maps are not inspired. In fact, if you look at the Exodus maps in the back of your Bible, most of them will look like this. I basically pulled out all the Bibles I had that had maps in them. And these are all the maps that are in the Bibles that I own. Most of them are repeated. This one is one of the most common ones. And what you see for the Exodus route, when you look through all of them, do you know what you don't see? You don't see them crossing the water anywhere. The line usually starts on the other side of the Gulf of Suez or the Nile, or you see them coming down. At no point in any of those maps do you ever see them crossing a body of water. And some of you have your Bibles out right now and you're checking it, and you don't see it. Now, one thing they do right, and I highlight this, is they put Midian on the far southeast side of the Gulf of Aqaba. If I go back through them, you'll see that Midian is always down by the Gulf of Aqaba. When we talk about the Red Sea tonight, remember, the Red Sea is Y-shaped, okay? You have the Gulf of Suez and you have the Gulf of Aqaba, okay? And Midian is always there in all the pictures, okay? Midian is modern-day Saudi Arabia, in case you don't know your geography, okay? That'll be important later on. And next to all these places in the Exodus, if you have your Exodus map, if your Exodus map cartographer is being honest, they will put question marks next to all of those different cities and locations. Why? Because they're not really sure. Or it's based on tradition. Okay? And this, according to tradition, mostly started through Roman Catholicism. Again, just being authentic here. That is supposed to be Mount Sinai, which is called Jabal Musa in Arabic, which literally just means the mountain of Moses. Okay? That's the traditional site. If you're looking in your Bibles, you'll see that they put Mount Sinai right there for the whole tradition. Okay? Now, the Byzantines built a church there. You can go there today. It's hot, Phoenix-like. You can go there and you can check out where they have all their different sites. Today, that's called St. Catherine's. It's named after some famous Catholic saint. I didn't bother researching her, but it's what it's called. And if that's the case, then the Red Sea crossing site has to be at one of those lakes. If that is not Mount Sinai, then one of those sites could very well be the crossing site. And those red ones are the ones I'm going to explore here in a minute. First, I want to debunk the purple one. And I'm going to try and do what I can. First, how did that place become the site for Mount Sinai? There was a woman by the name of Helena. Her son, perhaps you've heard of him, was Constantine, the first Christian Roman emperor. Okay? When Constantine becomes king, he sends his mother on a 5-year pilgrimage around the Holy Land to go find all the places mentioned in the Bible, basically for tax purposes. Okay? They set up churches in those places, they collect money, and they can make more money. Basically, it comes down to money, honestly. Helena claimed to have found all kinds of awesome things. She found Mount Sinai. She found the place in Bethlehem where Jesus was born. She found the crucifixion site. She even found a piece of the cross, allegedly. Good for her, right? Piece of wood lasting 300 years like that? Well done. She found dozens and dozens of places. In fact, if you've ever gone to the Holy Land today, all those Catholic places like the Church of the Nativity and all of that, that's her. Okay? And how did she pick these places? Local tradition, her intuition, and she had dreams. She had a feeling that this has to be the place. Anyways. Here's the problem though. Who's going to tell the king's mother that she's wrong? More importantly, who's going to tell the king that his mother is wrong? It's going to be a problem. And so once the Roman Catholic Church embraces these things as accurate, that's it. Once something becomes tradition, it's over. It's accepted as reality, right? Most of you still think there are 3 wise men because it's in a song. Once it makes a song and once it makes tradition, that's it. There are 3 wise men now forever, no matter how much the Bible does not talk about it. But that's how it goes, right? But I want to be authentic. What does the Bible say about this? Specifically about Mount Sinai. And I'm just going to be straight to the point. We're not going to jump around anything. Moses flees to Midian. What you see there on that red travel path, that is the normal caravan route in and out of Egypt for that part of the world. He's not traveling through the wilderness. I love Cecil B. DeMille. I love the Ten Commandments. I love watching Moses walking through the desert and him being refined and passing out and finding a palm tree. It's so good, Charleston Heston acting. No, he was walking down a known road. He would have been walking down the highway of his day. Hitchhiker going down the highway of his day. Okay? That's the way in and out of Midian. It's in Saudi Arabia. Okay? When he encounters Moses at the burning bush, when he encounters God at the burning bush, he's in Midian. It says he leaves Midian and he goes back to Egypt. Okay? And just to settle the matter indisputably, the Apostle Paul in Galatians 4:25, when he's talking about all these metaphors, in the midst of that, he just comes out straight up and says, Mount Sinai is in Arabia. Okay? There is no time in, at least I'm aware of, ancient history when any Arabian empire controlled the Sinai Peninsula. The Sinai Peninsula has always been the Sinai Peninsula, and Arabia has always been Arabia. In the Old Testament days, it was called Midian. In Jesus' day, it was Arabia. And obviously it's still Arabia today. It's just the Saudi family controls it, so it's Saudi Arabia. So when we talk about the real Red Sea crossing site, according to the Bible, what do we have to have? There is a specific criteria, according to the Bible, that the Red Sea crossing site has to have, and the real Mount Sinai has to have. There's no qualms about it. 1, the Red Sea crossing site should be big enough where 1 million+ people can camp for a period of time until God parts the sea. 2, it has to be out in kind of a wilderness area. The Bible says God kind of takes them off the main path and they go out into the wilderness. Pharaoh's like, wow, they're really stuck in there, aren't they? Right? And you can see all the Bible verses. I'm not just making this up. There are Bible verses to go with what I'm saying. 3, there's a narrow canyon road, right? Israel is trapped. They have no other escape routes, right? That's the desperation of the situation. The Pharaoh and his army is behind them, and the water is in front of them. They have 2 choices. Go get trampled by horses or go drown. That's when God does secret option number 3. But from a humanist point of view, from a natural point of view, there are only 2 choices. There's one way in, one way out, or we go drown. That's it. 4, it doesn't have to be, but there could be. Do we have any remains of horse bones or human bones or chariots? Do we or don't we? Don't have to be, but we could. 5, there has to be a gradual plane. Okay? You can't just walk across the sea. Okay, first of all, nothing's going to be perfectly flat. Nor can it be a canyon, okay? It can't be like Coyote and you just fall off of a cliff. You have old people, you have young little children, you have flocks and herds and wagons. You can't be a mountain climber trying to go up these crazy valleys and mountains that cross the Red Sea. It has to be a gradual slope going down, leveling out, and then it has to come gradually back up the other side. That's the only way this works. That's just plain physics. Okay? You got to have the handicap ramp to go down and the handicap ramp to go up. So this just big drop off, obviously on either side of the beach, will not work. So that has to be considered as well. What about the real Mount Sinai? The real Mount Sinai, the top of it said God's presence was there. Well, I don't know, and that his presence was like a fiery furnace. Okay? Things can experience heat, even rock, and not be changed. Okay? You set something on fire, its color is going to change. Unless God does something miraculous like the burning bush. Most of the time, when you set something on fire, it will undergo a change, even rock. Straight up. Things will be discolored. So this rock has to have a change in color. 2, there has to be a giant split rock that Moses split, and where millions of gallons of water or whatever had to come just gushing forth. A river of water to feed over, or to give 1 million people something to drink, including flocks and herds. So there has to be erosion. Why do I say that? Because in a part of the world where it gets about 1 inch of rain every 10 years, if you see a lot of erosion, you know that it's not because of the weather. There has to be a cave where Elijah can go in and hide when he's hiding from Jezebel. It says he goes to Horeb, Sinai, right? Do we have any kinds of remains of not the golden calf itself, but the altar that it was on? Also, Aaron got his staff from this location. We know later in the story it budded almonds. So are there almond trees nearby? It's quite a list. Also, again, just a practicality, it has to be big enough, the base of the mountain has to be big enough for 1 million people to live and camp there for over a year. And if they're going to be camping there for over a year, in case you've never noticed, and you know this very well, parents, children are messy. People are messy. Churches are messy. People leave their junk behind every week. People forget stuff. Kids break stuff. Your favorite dishes, your pots, your pans, whatever. Kids break stuff. So there should be trash around. It might be buried under dirt, but there should be broken pottery. There should be broken plates, broken drinking vessels. Stuff breaks because kids break stuff and adults are messy. We're all messy. And if you have 1 million people there, you should be able to find something left behind, right? So, let's start with the Red Sea. Let's start by eliminating all these lakes up at the north, that thing that was purple earlier. Is this technically the Yam Suf? The Yam Suf is the Hebrew word for the Sea of Reeds. Yes. Great, it means Sea of Reeds. But is the Bible talking about a bunch of swamps with a bunch of cattails? Did God drown the army of Pharaoh in like a meter of swamp water? Is that what we get from the Bible about the word Yam Suf? If you go through Exodus and every time you see the word Red Sea mentioned, most of your Bibles will probably have a little footnote. And at the bottom it'll say, Sea of Reeds. Great. So are we talking just about lakes, or is there more to it than that? Okay. Here's the problem why the Red Sea crossing site cannot be any of those lakes. And there are good scholars who want to argue that there is. The problem with that is most of those lakes are 1 to 5 meters deep. Does that sound like what the Bible describes? Does that seem like what Cecil B. DeMille did in the Ten Commandments, right? Does this sound like a small little swamp or lake to you? Moses' song, by the blast of your nostrils, the waters piled up. The surging waters stood like a wall. The deep waters congealed in the heart of the sea. The psalmist wrote, the waters saw you, God. The waters saw you and withered. They writhed. The very depths were convulsed. Your path led through the sea, your way through the mighty waters. A little creative licensing or not, that does not sound like a 10-foot wave coming down and crashing on the Egyptian army. We're talking massive walls of water. Something so big and so grand, it would be burned into the minds of the Jewish people for thousands of years, even today, right? Why is it that in almost every book of the Bible, there's always at least one reference back to the Exodus event, with a few exceptions of the minor prophets? Why are the Old Testament writers and some of the New Testament writers always throwing back to Exodus, to the Red Sea? Because it was such a monumental miracle that it's not until the time of Jesus that we see something on this grand of a scale. As far as just the sheer power and display, this is God beyond any shadow of a doubt. Other problems with trying to make Yam Suf mean just those lakes. 6 other times in the Bible, the word Yam Suf is used to describe Israel's southern border, which is the Gulf of Aqaba. I'll show you a map here in a minute. You can't say Israel's southern border are the northern lakes of Egypt. It just literally doesn't work. Okay? It's like saying, I'm talking about Florida, but someone wants to say that, oh, he's talking about Maine. No, the difference between Florida and Maine is very far apart. But that's kind of the argument that they're trying to make. Oh, well, they're the same word. Yeah. Exodus 23. I will establish your borders from the Red Sea, Yam Suf, to the Mediterranean Sea, from the desert to the Euphrates. King Solomon built ships at Ezion-Geber, which is near Elath on Edom, on the shores of the Red Sea. Putting this on a map, okay? They describe Yam Suf as the southern border of Egypt, or of Israel. You can't make the argument that that is Israel's southern border. It just doesn't work. Solomon is not building his navy city over in Egypt. The word Yam Suf is a ubiquitous term. The word Yam Suf, or Red Sea, meant all of this water, including those lakes. I'm not saying that those lakes aren't called Yam Suf. They are. What I'm saying is all of the water was called Yam Suf. It was all called Red Sea. It was all called the Sea of Reeds. But just to say that the Red Sea site had to be the crossing over at the lakes up in the north of Egypt, it just doesn't work. Yes, that is the Yam Suf, but that's not the Yam Suf we're referring to. We're talking about another part of the Yam Suf, where Solomon built his city on the northern part of the Gulf of Aqaba and on the southern part of Israel. I hope that makes sense. I hope I'm explaining that well enough. Every part of the water of the Red Sea is the Gulf of Aqaba, the Gulf of Suez. All those lakes, all of that is Yam Suf. All of that is the Red Sea. Last point, just why it can't be the lakes. If God parted a lake for the Jewish people to cross through, why didn't the Egyptians just go around? If there's 1 million people going through the lake, the Egyptians are on chariots. Their horses are faster than slow people. They would have went around left and right of the lake, and they would have just slaughtered the Jewish people on the other side. Why chase them into the water? Why try to go through the pillar of fire when I can just go left or right? Like, duh. And even after you drowning, well, do you know what's on the other side of that lake? An Egyptian fort with more soldiers. And you know what's after that fort? About 10 miles down the road from there, another Egyptian fort with more soldiers. There's about 12 forts that run across the entire northern part of Sinai. So good luck with that. The geography is wrong for the lakes to be the Red Sea crossing site. Why? Because it's a flat plain with a lake. And then on the other side of the lake is a flat plain. You read Exodus 13 and 14, it talks about mountains, it talks about deserts, it talks about wilderness that has trapped them in. The geography just doesn't match. And most practically of all, the road that they're traveling, if you want to go southeast to Sinai, well, that road takes you northeast. And God literally forbid them to take that northeast road. He said, do not go the way of the Philistines, the road of the Philistines. Even though it's shorter, don't go. Today, that road is called Interstate 40. I was looking at it on Google Earth. It's the same, so it's not quite our I-40. Theirs probably has less potholes. But, so it can't be that road. It can't be the middle road. These are the 3 roads that run through ancient Egypt, the caravan roads. Those 2 roads go north. One goes up to Canaan. The other one takes you right up to Jerusalem and Jericho. So that literally only leaves the 3rd and bottom row, which is the road Moses took, which is the road you would want to take if you want to go to Sinai. Oops, let me back up. It's a little hard to see here, but it's there. It's highlighted in yellow. The road forks twice. Okay? It goes this way. You could go around and come down to Sinai, or you could come down here, which is kind of through the wilderness, which I'll make an argument for. And then there's the 3rd one that comes down this way, which is what some scholars think, and that would take you to the Helen's Mount Sinai. So it's a possibility. But those are the 3 ways if you're taking that road. But again, God is leading these people, okay? They can't go the easy way. They have to go the hard way through the wilderness, as we've already talked about. God is leading them in the cloud by day, in the pillar of fire by night, through the Red Sea. God is the one who is leading these people. And if he takes them off the main road to go down a beaten path where there's no way out, God has a plan. So realistically, those are the two choices. Either they disobeyed God and they went that way, or they obeyed God because literally God was leading them, and they went through the wilderness. Those are really the only two options. And most of the liberal secular scholars who don't believe in anything supernatural, and they're always trying to look for natural ways to dismiss the Exodus or explain the Exodus. Oh, a volcano erupted and they were following the lava and the Red Sea turned red because of the algae and and they're looking for all these natural ways to explain it. Yeah, God uses natural things sometimes to do supernatural stuff, and sometimes he just does supernatural stuff. Okay? Jesus did not rise up from the grave because he miraculously resuscitated himself. He was dead. Miracle. He got up. Okay? There was nothing natural about it. It was entirely supernatural. It's like, you call yourself a Christian, you believe in the resurrection of Christ, but you don't believe that God can part the waters. Like, come on. I want to submit to you as a hypothesis, just a hypothesis, that this could be a good way that they traveled. Coming out at the beach called Nuweiba, which is this beach right here, which, as you can see, there's one way in and one way out. This is what it looks like in that path. But it matches what Pharaoh said. This is Exodus 14:3, right? The wilderness has shut them in. They were entangled. They were boxed in. They were closed in. Different translations say it different ways, but it's the same effect. It was a very claustrophobic experience. And if this is where they crossed, then there's a good chance that Mount Sinai is right there, in Arabia, in Midian, the way Paul said. Again, just some more pictures of the road going in. The Roman Jewish historian Josephus described the Red Sea crossing site in this way. He said, "For there was on each side of a ridge mountains at the end of the sea that were impassable by reason of their roughness and obstructed their flight." In other words, the mountains came right up to the water, and they were there and they were stuck on both sides. There was literally no way out, is what he's trying to say. And this area matches what the Bible says. This area matches what Josephus wrote. Now, in case you're wondering, how big is this place? It's 15 square miles. It's about 3 miles by 5 miles. So 15 square miles. From one end of the beach to the other is 9.7 miles across the water. Nuweiba is the short form of the name. Its full name is Nuweiba, that Islamic word. Here's an old British map. But when we translate the Arabic into English, it literally translates as the place where the waters open for Moses. The Muslims, the enemies of the Jews, called Nuweiba al-Muni, the place where the waters open for Moses. So even the enemies of the Jews admit something happened here, and they gave Moses credit for it. King Solomon and his boys, he builds his city. If you remember from the verse, he builds his city up here. And every time they sail down, they would be sailing past Nuweiba. They would know, hey, this is where God parted the waters for us 500 years ago. Why is that important? Because they have found pillars One on the left side, one on the right, both sides of the shore. Okay? Found them back in the late 70s, early 80s. There was one on the Saudi side that was still standing. When the Saudi government found out what it actually was, they got rid of it and no one has seen it ever since. The one on the Sinai side, the Egyptian side, or this time in history, the Jewish side, because the Jews still controlled Sinai after the Six-Day War. They hadn't given it back to Egypt yet. This pillar had fallen over into the water. So divers went and retrieved it and got it out. And today it's sitting at Nuweiba in concrete, and you can go and see it. Okay? Now, what was written on it, barely making out, at least on the Saudi side, before it got taken down, there were a few words that were still legible in Proto-Hebrew, old school Hebrew. Those words that could be made out were Mizraim, which is the old word for Egypt, death, water, Pharaoh, Edom, Yahweh, Solomon. Now, this is just my opinion. The Bible tells us in 1 Kings 6:8 that Solomon started building the temple on the 480th year of the Exodus. That's just 20 years away from the 500-year anniversary. Now, just my opinion, what better way to celebrate the 500-year anniversary of the Red Sea crossing than to put up two pillars on either side? Kind of the bicentennial, I don't know what the word for five centuries would be, but bicentennial, tricentennial, pentatennial, I don't know. Sounds right. Again, maybe he put it up before, maybe he put it after, but in my mind, 500 is a nice round number. It'd be the best time to put it up. But those pillars are still there even today.
It had fallen down and was lying in the edge of the water, but today it is about 500 feet from the sea and has been set in concrete. Features of the red granite pillar include the fact that it is of Phoenician or Hebrew design and is 3,000 years old. It was placed here for a reason, to mark the location of the crossing of the Red Sea on dry ground. On the Saudi pillar were Hebrew inscriptions which included the words Pharaoh, Mizraim or Egypt, Moses, death, water, Yahweh, Solomon, and Edom. The inscriptions on this column have been removed, since the Egyptians living here were not excited about a Hebrew celebration marker located in their own backyard.
If some of you have heard this theory before, you may have also heard the idea that there's this land bridge that's right there at Nuweiba. It's kind of half true and kind of misleading. It's not really a land bridge. Like, just 100 feet under the water and it's just perfectly smooth across. No, it's not. So these pictures actually are not true. Even though you find them on some Christian websites that make this argument, it's actually not true. Now, what is true, it's a partial truth, there is a plateau under there. That plateau comes up very high. However, what it is true, if you look here on this colored version, red is shallow and blue is deep. So red, yellow, da-da-da. If this one helps even better, you can see how as you go out, it gets deeper and deeper, but it's gradual. The line comes down gradually. It's literally a 6 or 7 degree angle as you come down. You go across once you hit the bottom, and then it comes up the other side at a 6 or 7 degree incline, depending on exactly where you are. Why is that important? Highways and roads that you drive down to Phoenix are built at a 7 degree incline. Handicap ramps are built at a 7.1 degree incline. The point is, whether you were old or young or had flocks, it's a gradual going down and it's a gradual coming up. If you could take each parts of the Gulf of Aqaba and look at them from the side, that's what these green things are. If you could drain all the water out and look at each part from the side, cut off a piece of the land, this is what it would look like. Nuweiba is the top one. It goes gradually down and then gradually up. Other sites that people have hypothesized for the Red Sea crossing site are those other three. But if you look at these two, you can see that, yeah, they're gradual going down, but that is quite the steep hill on the right side coming up the other side. And this one is a freaking yo-yo, okay? It's just woo, like it just doesn't work. Now, however, this one is still the second most popular theory. And you're like, well, why? Because they have a little bit of a cheat code, and I'll tell you about it here in a few minutes. This is interesting and controversial, but I feel that it's at least worth talking about. Have they actually found chariot parts at this part of the Red Sea? They have found coral that looks very interesting. Coral that has 90-degree angles. Last I checked, nature doesn't grow 90-degree angles. Humans make 90-degree angles. And stuff grows, coral grows on stuff that humans make. They found this. I mean, I'm not an expert on cars and mechanic stuff, but that certainly kind of looks like a chariot wheel and an axle to me, or at least the hub of one. They found these, which again, if they're not wheels, I don't know what they are. And then this one, if that's not a chariot axle and two wheels on the top and bottom turned on its side, again, 90-degree angles. You gotta do something with it. You can ignore it, I suppose, but it's there and it's interesting. Also, we can't go down there. I mean, you can go down there, but you can't bring anything up. The Egyptian government, for reasons, have made it illegal to salvage anything. So if you do it, you're gonna be risking going to jail. So count your cost.
Investigations have revealed artifacts which confirm our previous conclusions about the site. The seafloor is smooth and contains gradual contours. Our first artifact to inspect is this chariot wheel that still has 3 of its 4 spokes, plus the hub is extending upward. We see 90-degree angles here, which are a sign of man-made structure. The Lord looked down upon the army of the Egyptians, and he took off their chariot wheels. The chariot wheel with 6 spokes was the most widely used by the Egyptians. Egyptian chariots were known to use metal hubs in the center of the wheels. Using metal detectors, divers have found metal in the raised hubs that are now covered in coral. Horse remains have also been found here, such as this shrunken hoof. Horses are not in the Sinai Peninsula today. Human remains have also been found, such as this coral-covered femur bone on the right. Lab tests confirmed that it is in fact bone. Other bones have also been found. A cross-section reveals the bone inside the coral. Here we see a chariot wheel standing on its axle in this old 1978 footage. Next we see an 8-spoke wheel with 1 spoke missing. 8-spoke wheels were only used during the 18th dynasty, the time of the Exodus.
In the spring of 2000, a robotic camera was lowered into these waters for the first time.
This has never been done. No one have been in the area at all with a remote control camera.
The robotic camera's survey revealed many shapes and objects familiar to Mueller, including coral formations with right angles, arches, discs, and straight shafts fused into larger masses that had the appearance of twisted wreckage.
Now, when we have been able to go back and forth with a remote control camera, we can repeatedly see that these strange structures we are looking for are there. Not at one place, but you see them again and again and again. There are situations where you see something that looks like an axle, a hub, something that looks like a wheel, and you say to yourself, this is not a coral reef, this is a coral growth on an artifact. And that is what's different to me when I compare corals at other locations around the world.
Since the earliest explorations at Nuweiba, one distinctive type of formation has often been identified on the seafloor.
It's a 90-degree angle, a right angle, between something that looks like an axle and the wheel. And you can see this in different varieties, and it looks very different from normal coral growth. And it is like a man-made structure with a coral growth on it.
In the midst of them, Pan Chien photographed this circular object attached to what appears to have been a broken axle or hub. This discovery was significant for two reasons. Pan Chien had documented the coral-encrusted form of a wheel with dimensions similar to ancient Egyptian artifacts, directly across from the proposed Nuweiba crossing site. Her find also provided independent confirmation of earlier evidence establishing wheel-like formations on both coasts of the Red Sea, in accordance with descriptions in the biblical record.
So, again, preponderance of evidence. Can I say 100% that Nuweiba is the crossing place? No. But when I start putting all the pieces together, you can certainly start at least trying to make the case for it, I think. Nuweiba matches most of the criteria. Okay? It's not perfect, but it's really good. Solomon set up pillars there. 500 around there, give or take. Jewish historians Josephus' description matches fairly well. The Arabs named that place. The enemies of the Jews believe that something happened there with Moses and the waters moving. And controversial as it may be, there's something down there that looks like wheels and hubs and 90-degree angles and horse remains and human remains. Horses don't live in the Sinai Peninsula. So something happened there. I said there's a second candidate, the bottom. That's the yo-yo one. And you're like, how is that a candidate? The answer is not necessarily the seafloor, but the coral reef that grows there. It's called the Jackson Reef. If you look here, even on Google Earth, you can still see a lot of the coral, even with thousands of years of water hitting against it. Some of it is still even above the surface. From a side view, from an airplane. And this is why. This is the cheat code. These guys are not standing on the shore. They're standing literally in the middle of the water. It's just the coral comes up that high that they're there at high tide. Okay? You can see the shoreline in the background. Like, he's not like 20 feet out. He's halfway out. He's standing there. It's pretty cool. So again, they have a cheat code. They didn't walk across the sea floor, they walked across the coral. So it's an interesting candidate for sure. How are we doing? We okay? Do we need a break? We're all good? Okay, because we've got about a half hour left. Everyone good? Okay, I guess we're gonna keep going, Chris. I mentioned this on Sunday. Now that I have better technology, I've replaced Curtis's technology and they're compatible now. I can show you more than just this picture. I'm so excited. One of the places where they stop along the way is Elam. Okay? Elam has 70 palms and 12 wells when Moses is rolling in there around 1446 BC, give or take. When he's there, there are 70 palm trees. Now I know that 70 and 12 have big theological importance. They're Bible numbers, all right? They show up all the time. And a lot of Bible scholars will look for amazing theological and metaphorical meanings for them, and that's great. But practically, there could also be 70 palm trees there. And there could be 12 wells. Now, it has been 3,500 years. Palm trees don't last that long. Are there still 70 palm trees there? No, there are not. However, there are still 12 wells there. Now, some of those wells don't work. Some of them are dried out. Some of them are kind of broken. But there are still 12 wells there. And a couple of them still work. You can see them there in that aerial, a couple more of them. Why this is amazing is because whether you are going through, whether you're crossing at Nuweiba or down here, at Nuweiba you would just come down to Elam and make your way over that way. Or if you're coming down and around and you went across this way, you got to go through Elim. Okay? Whether you're coming this way or that way, you're going to get to Elim. There's no way to avoid that oasis, which is in modern day, it's called Al-Bad. Kind of a weird name, but it's not a bad place, but it's called Al-Bad area. And that oasis is there. And it matches the biblical description. Again, minus the palm trees because 3,000 plus years of time. But very cool. Oasis in the desert. Which then takes you to Jabal al-Lawz, the mountain beside it, also called Jabal Musa, which means the mountain of Moses. And what is so cool, again, Paul's words, not mine. Mount Sinai is in Arabia, Midian. I submit to you that this is probably one of the best candidates for the real Mount Sinai, the real Mount Horeb. Okay? The Saudi government, back in the 80s, they built a big giant fence around the whole area so no one could go in. Many people risked their lives over the next 20, 50, 30 years to sneak in there and get pictures. The one couple that did it the most was the couple, their last name was Codwell, Jim and Penny Codwell. He was an oil engineer for OPEC. And in his time off, him and his family would go here with their home video camera and record stuff, and then smuggle it out of the country and send it back. Today you can go on YouTube and watch all of their 90s home videos online. It's fairly interesting. In 2019, the new king of Egypt, Ben Soleimani, the guy who took the chainsaw and cut up the reporter, he did do one good thing. He opened up Saudi Arabia a little bit more. So if you got about $6 grand, you can get on an airplane, you can join a tour group, you have to pass a few background checks. But right now, of all things, the New York Times in June of this year published an article saying Saudi Arabia opens up their country to tourists, and of all the people, it's Christians who are going. Well, what are they going to see? They're going to Jabal al-Lawz. They're going to that mountain. Why that mountain? Because it's burnt on top. Other reasons too. But of all the mountains, it is the tallest mountain in the area. It's about 8,500 feet. And at the top, it's burnt. It's charcoaled. It's literally metamorphic rock surrounded by igneous rock. For those of you who remember your science growing up, metamorphic rock gets created when you have something really, really hot, like lava, coming in contact with igneous rock, and it undergoes a chemical change. Oh, sorry. Again, Josephus said that Mount Sinai was the tallest mountain in that part of Arabia by that city. And today, Jabal al-Lawz is the tallest mountain in that part of Saudi Arabia, near the remains of that city, about 8,500 feet above sea level. Even in this old footage from the Codwells and their video camera back in the 90s, you can still clearly see the delineating line between the light granite and the dark metamorphic rock. Really, it's been tested. It's metamorphic rock. There's no question of that. The only question is, how did it get there? Either a volcano made it, or something maybe a little more supernatural made it. The problem with it being a volcano, why is only the top burnt? If lava's coming down the side of a mountain like a riverbed, why isn't the side of the mountain the whole way coming down? Why isn't there just a stream of burnt rock? Why is it only the top that's burnt and has been transformed from igneous into metamorphic rock? Because only the top experienced an intense fire, which perfectly matches the biblical record of God's presence on the mountain. Here's the view looking down. It's a pretty cool view. So, I ask you just a simple question. We're kind of halfway through, a little more than halfway through. Which one matches the biblical record better? The one in Sinai? Or the traditional one that the Catholic Church made up because of Constantine's mom had a feeling? Which one looks more right based on the biblical description? Now, is my only argument the color's different? Well, that would be a really weak argument. There's more. More specifically, there's that. To me, this is the main selling point. That rock right there. That rock is huge, by the way. It's about 100 feet off the ground and it's about 50 feet tall. I'll show you some more pictures in a minute. That rock is split down the middle, perfectly down the middle. It's wide enough that a full-grown man can stand in the middle of it and be perfectly fine. Okay? There are river contours that run down there. There's smooth rock. There's erosion. There's like path where a dried out river ran through there. I'll show you the photos in a second. Again, they get 1 inch of rain a year. If it was erosion, the entire area would have erosion. But it's just these narrow little cuts through the ground. This side, normal jagged rocks. This part in the middle, that's had like a little river path made into it, a dry riverbed, all those rocks are smooth. How do you account for that? And again, this rock is huge. A full-grown guy can stand in the middle of it. It's over 50 feet tall, like we said. Just for perspective, there's a human standing there, there's an adult man, and that's the rock. Just to put it into size perspective. I'll show you a video here in a second with some drone footage. Hooray for modern technology, right? Those are the Codwells. They were the first to do it, so I kind of honored them a little bit by showing them. They were the first to find this rock. Other people had thought Jabal al-Lawz, but no one had ever found that rock. It was on the other side of the mountain. They were the first to find it, so kind of giving them credit.
The historian Josephus said that the split rock could still be seen in his time, and it was so big that it could not have been moved. Is it possible that this split rock still remains today, testifying to the accuracy of this story? The answer is yes, and it is stunning. This split rock was first discovered by Jim and Penny Caldwell, an American couple that was working in Saudi Arabia in the early 1990s. The local Bedouins have long had two names for this area, the Water of Moses and the Split Rock of Moses. This split rock is on top of a 100-foot hill and is somewhere between 40 and 60 feet high. And what's really amazing about this specific location in the valley along the possible route to Mount Sinai is that the rocks underneath the split rock are smooth, as if tons and tons of water poured forth, forming a miniature lake at the bottom for the Israelites to drink from.
When you take pictures of that area and pictures of the kind of the dried out riverbed and you kind of Photoshop where the water would go, you can kind of clearly see the way the water would come down and fill up that little area at the bottom. So we kind of Photoshopped the blue over it, and it makes you able to see the smooth rock areas so much better. It really does look like just a river going downhill. You could feed or give a drink to 1 million people easily with that much water. Again, how do you account for the erosion? How do you account for a perfectly split smooth rock? There are no other split rocks in the area. None at all. Just some kind of more fun CGI or Photoshop. Trying to imagine what Moses would have done that day. What about Elijah's cave? Is there a cave on this mountain? There is. It's right there. It's not very deep. You can't go far in, but there's still a cave where Elijah would have heard the still small voice of God. When you look out from the cave, there's no sound on this one. Here's Codwell's footage from the 90s. It's okay, but I'll show you some drone footage here in a second. Or not drone footage, but a guy who's up there with his camera. And so here's what it looks like from the cave today. This is the view. You have a great view of the bottom. It's pretty cool. So there is a cave there. Checks that box. Jabal al-Lawz, in case you're wondering, in Arabic, the name means mountain of almonds. Now again, what budded from Aaron's rod? Almond branch. Kind of God's way of saying, hey, Moses and Aaron are my chosen guys. I did the miracle with them. You guys, your rods did not bud anything. So yeah, you're charlatans. These are my guys. You're fake. These are the real thing. And it's called the mountain of almonds because almonds trees do grow in that area. So just a fun random fact. A big one, right? What about the altar of the golden calf? Have you ever wondered why in Exodus 32, 4, 5, Aaron says to the people, these are your gods, plural, but he only made one golden calf? Why is he using plural nouns in Hebrew and English when he only made one? Well, this pile of rocks, within the fenced-in area, there's a smaller fenced-in area. It's this right here. You're like, it's a pile of rocks. True, but what did it used to be? If you know what petroglyphs are basically drawings on rock. Hieroglyphics on rocks, if you will. And the Egyptians, at this time in history, their chief god was Apis, their female god, Hathor, represented by the bull and the cow. So why did the Egyptians make a golden calf? Because they're imitating Egyptian religion and cow worship at the time. What do you find carved all over those rocks? You find picture after picture after picture of cows being drawn. Cattle are not native to Saudi Arabia for obvious reasons. It's a desert. And yet, the Arabians never worship cattle in any of their pagan mythology or any of their worship. The Egyptians did, the Arabs did not. And yet you find petroglyphs after petroglyphs of cattle all around this place. So what I'm just spitballing here. When he says, these are your gods, what if Aaron is referring to the golden calf on top of the altar and to all of the drawings on the side? Speaking in plurality, with the main guy on top and all the little drawings on the sides. Just kind of throwing that out there as a possibility. Now, you may be asking, well, did the locals do this? No, again, they don't worship cattle. They could care less. Well, did an Egyptian come along and do this? How do we know that an Egyptian didn't come along and do this? How do we know that it was Israel who did this? Because a few miles away, there is other petroglyphs. And in that set of petroglyphs, which are similar to these petroglyphs, what's there? What else got carved besides cattle? A menorah. No Egyptian is going to carve a religious symbol of a Jewish slave in worship. A Jew carved that, not an Egyptian. This photo was taken in 2006 by a Korean doctor. Unfortunately, in 2020, during COVID, when all the world was going crazy, somebody went there and vandalized that one particular carving. All the other carvings they left intact. But the Jewish menorah, you can see in the picture, they destroyed it. So you will never be able to see that again except in photos. So if you went to Saudi Arabia today, that's been destroyed. Gee, I wonder why. Very sad. And that was just right during the pandemic. Also, at the very top, on no other rock, just this one at the very high point, there is this big circle. Because something has been grinded down. Well, that's a very interesting thing. Because how does Moses destroy the golden calf? It says that he grounded it down into powder and then made them drink it. Well, I'm not saying that's where he did it, but somebody went up there and grinded that part of the rock down and no other rock for some reason. Someone did something up there for some reason. Why not that? Again, just an idea. Moses, before him and the 70 elders, went up to the halfway up the mountain, and they had this big lunch with Jesus. Like, God showed up in human form in Exodus 24. That had to be the most awkward lunch of all time. Could you imagine trying to eat a sandwich when Jesus is sitting right there and literally the ground beneath his feet is turning blue crystal? Like, it would be a little awkward. I'd be terrified. But that's literally what was happening. God was there, the ground was turning blue like the sky, and they're freaking out. Before that, God tells them, Moses, I want you to go and make 12 pillars, one for each of the 12 tribes of Israel, and I want you to build an altar where we can sacrifice animals. If you go to Jabal al-Lawz today, what do you find? You find 12 pillars to this day. They're not very big. They're about 24 inches in diameter, but clearly man-made rocks that were carved by guys into these pillars. Also, just using Google Earth, I don't know if you can see it, it looks like sergeant stripes. There's a corral. We zoom in a little bit better. There's a corral. There's a platform for slaughtering. And there's an altar for sacrificing and burning. They have found the remains of cattle bones there, in case you're wondering. Clearly, you can see the man-made fence using those rocks that they made. You can even see the rod where they would have put the gates. You can literally see the imprint of the rod they would have used to act as a gate to keep the cattle in. The slaughter area. And then up at the very top, the flat platform of where they would have had the fire going for where they would have offered up the sacrifice. Here's kind of a modern drone picture of it. It's there too. Kind of brand new, at least for me. I've never added this part before. Around there are tombstones. In fact, if you remember the story of where the Amalekites come by the tomb where the water split, the Amalekites attack all of the stragglers who are behind. The old, the young, the women who were way back there taking their time to catch up to the rest of the group. They got attacked by the Amalekites shortly after after the Jewish people arrived. And if you remember, Moses sends out the army to go fight them, and he has to hold his hands up in the air, and when his hands comes down, they start losing. So you got Aaron holding up his arms, like, oh, my arms are getting tired. It's your turn to take over. All right, Josh, you got this, right? And they took shifts holding up Moses' arms so they could win. That battle, we found tombstones, Proto-Hebrew. This one says dead Amalekite, dead Amalek. Another two that are still there, Proto-Hebrew. The top one says died, Hagar. Underneath it, there's another one, Proto-Hebrew. It says died, Amaya, daughter of Hagar. So here's a dead Jewish woman and her daughter. And right beside them is another tomb marker saying an Amalekite. Did he come and kill those two? And then Joshua or Caleb or whoever comes and kills him? Because it matches what the Bible says. Those people who are lagging behind get attacked. And here's a dead woman and her daughter. The kind of people who you would expect to probably be kind of at the end of the line. Especially if that particular Hagar was really, really old and her daughter was helping her. Or something to that effect. I mentioned the South Korean doctor. We're almost done, don't worry. If I'm losing you, we got about 5 more minutes. Dr. Sung Hak Kim, secretly a Christian. If you remember in Saudi Arabia, you have the king, he's got like 20,000 wives and like 50,000 kids. And each one of those princes runs some kind of government. This prince happened to be the governor of this area. His personal medical doctor was Dr. Kim. And Kim heard about this and he wanted to go check it out. So he got permission from the guy. So back before 2019, the only guy who had unlimited access legally without sneaking in was this guy. He went there 12 times. And when he went there, he kind of did his own fake archaeology type digging around in the dirt. Unfortunately, he may have broken some things because he's a medical professional, not an archaeologist. But what he did find, this is his personal collection. He's found pottery, broken plates, broken pots, intact. He's found a lot of broken trash. And he's the guy who took the picture of the menorah. So God bless him for that we still have that. That's his personal collection. I hope he gives it to a museum one day or something. But that's his for now. It's pretty cool. So again, preponderance of evidence. You have the mountaintop, you have the pillars, you have the petroglyphs, you have the rock, you have the slaughter area, you have the cave of Elijah, all those things we talked about. When you put them all together, does it seem plausible? Possibly. If you have recently heard about how they finally opened up publicly the stairs, they found the Pool of Siloam, and the stairs that went straight up to the temple top in Israel are now open to the public. This is the guy who did that excavation. He's not a practicing Jew. He's Jewish, but he's not Orthodox, right? He's a secular, atheist type Jew. And he's taking tour groups now to Jabal al-Lawz. And in one of those tour groups, someone asked him flat out, do you think this is the real Mount Sinai? Now, because it's so controversial, if he comes out and says yes, 100% without a shadow of doubt, without really any official archaeology digs ever being done there, he would lose all public credibility. His career would be over. But what he did say in the clip I saw, he came out and said, of all of the various Mount Sinai candidates, Jabal al-Lawz is the best candidate that I've seen. And just for him to say that much with his credentials is pretty amazing. Now again, maybe he's right, maybe he's wrong. Can't say 100%, but based on the current information that we have, this is the best candidate in his opinion, in mine too, or I wouldn't be up here sharing it with you. So here's the deal. Did this actually happen? Yes, it did. Is this the real place where it happened? Maybe. Probably. However, should you believe anything that I've said? Well, maybe. But what should you do? What is the proper response to this? The proper response is to be a good Berean. Go look at it for yourself, because ultimately it comes down to the Word of God. If anything in here contradicts the Word of God, then get rid of all of it. If one part of Jabal al-Lawz contradicts what the Bible says, then forget it. This isn't the place, because the Bible has the final say. Do your own research. You can go online and Google and find 10 people who will say it is, and 10 people who will say that it isn't, and some who will say maybe. I told you at the beginning, I'm in the maybe camp. But like 70 to 80% convinced, until something better comes along. But until that time, I think this is a really good candidate. There is a real Mount Sinai out there. There is a real Red Sea crossing out there. It really happened. The Bible is reliable and trustworthy. Even if we did find the real Mount Sinai beyond a shadow of a doubt evidence, you know as well as I do, there would still be people who would deny that it's true. Because if it's true, the Bible is true, God is real, and they have to give an account to Him. And they don't want to do that. But for now, I think we're in a pretty good spot. Certainly better than where we were in the 1990s when we had to smuggle out home video footage from the Codwells. So I leave you with this challenge. Go do your own research. Find your own questions. Be a good Berean. Study the scriptures diligently and see if these things are true.